The family had been dead for 4 days before anyone found them. But here is the detail that changes everything. In those 4 days, someone had been living in the house. The cattle had been fed, the fire had been kept burning, food had been eaten from the kitchen, cigarettes had been smoked in the living room. The killer did not run. They stayed. This is the true story of the Hinterkaifeck farm, one of the most chilling unsolved murders in European history. A case that has never been closed, a killer that was never caught, and a mystery that over 100 years later still has no answer. About 70 kilometers north of Munich, in the Bavarian countryside, there is a stretch of farmland that sits almost perfectly between 2 small villages, far enough from each that if something went wrong, no one would hear it. In 1922, this land was called Hinterkaifeck, a small working farm, home to 6 people. Andreas Gruber was 63 years old, a stubborn, difficult man by all accounts, the kind of farmer who kept to himself, who did not welcome visitors, and who trusted no one easily. His wife, Cecilia, was 72. Their widowed daughter, Victoria, lived with them after her husband died in the First World War. Victoria had 2 children of her own, a 7-year-old girl, also named Cecilia, and a baby boy named Josef, who was just 2 years old. And then there was Maria Baumgartner, the new maid. She had arrived at Hinterkaifeck that very same day, her first day, her last day. 6 people on a farm, in the middle of nowhere. No telephone, no close neighbors, and a killer who, it seems, had been watching them for some time. The first sign something was wrong came about a week before the murders. Andreas Gruber walked out to the edge of his property and found footprints in the snow. They came from the direction of the forest and led directly toward the farm buildings. There were no footprints leading back. Andreas told his neighbors about this. He seemed more puzzled than afraid. He walked the perimeter of the farm, but found no one. Whatever had made those tracks had not, apparently, left. That was the first sign. The second, strange noises had been coming from the attic for several days. Shuffling, movement above the ceiling in the night. Andreas and Cecilia both mentioned this to neighbors. Again, more as a strange curiosity than as a cause for panic. Old houses make noise. Animals find their way in. The third sign was a Munich newspaper that appeared at the farm. A publication that no one at Hinterkaifeck had ordered or subscribed to. It was simply there, one morning. The fourth, a set of house keys went missing. Andreas searched. He could not find them. And the fifth, perhaps the most telling of all, was the matter of the previous maid. Her name was Crescens Rieger. She had worked at Hinterkaifeck for years, and then some months before the murders, she had abruptly quit. She told people who asked that the farm felt wrong, that she had seen things, that she could not stay there. The family hired Maria Baumgartner as her replacement. Maria arrived on the morning of March 31st, 1922. She was 44 years old. She had brought her belongings in a single bag. She met the family, settled into her room, and began her duties. By nightfall, she would be dead, and so would everyone else. Forensic investigators who reconstructed the events of that night believe the killer had a plan and that they were already on the property. The adults were lured out, one at a time. Andreas was the first to go to the barn. It is believed he noticed something, a sound, a light, something that drew him away from the house. The moment he stepped inside, the killer was waiting. He was struck repeatedly with a mattock, a heavy-headed farming tool, part pick, part axe. Andreas Gruber died in the barn. Then Cecilia was drawn out. Then Victoria. Then young Cecilia, the 7-year-old girl. The investigators noted something about the child's body that has haunted everyone who has studied this case. Her hands. Her small hands showed that she had survived the initial attack, that she had been conscious. In the dark of that barn, next to the bodies of her grandfather, her grandmother, and her mother, little Cecilia had been alive and aware for some time. The evidence suggests she had torn clumps of her own hair out. She was found still clutching it. After the barn, the killer entered the house. Baby Joseph was killed in his crib in the bedroom. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid who had arrived only hours earlier, was killed in her room before she had even fully unpacked. 6 people, 1 night, 1 weapon. The killer closed the barn doors. They went back into the house, they sat down, and they stayed. For 4 days after the murders, the farm looked from the outside completely normal. Smoke rose from the chimney each morning. A neighbor who passed on the road noticed it. He thought nothing of it. The family kept to themselves. It was cold. Of course, there was a fire. The cattle were fed daily. Their water trough was refilled. This was not negligence. Whoever remained in that farmhouse was maintaining it, keeping up appearances, or simply in no hurry to leave. The mail began to pile up at the end of the lane. Letters, a newspaper or two, uncollected. On April 4th, 4 days after the killings, a postman noticed the stack of unread mail and became concerned. He mentioned it to a local man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who had reason to know the family well. Lorenz had, it was widely known, fathered Victoria's son Joseph. Lorenz gathered 2 other neighbors, and together they walked up the lane to the farm. They called out. No answer. They found the barn first. The 4 bodies, Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia, were laid out under a layer of straw, as though someone had tried to tidy them away. Inside the house, they found Joseph in his crib. They found Maria Baumgartner in her room, her bag still not fully unpacked. The farm was empty. The fire in the stove was cold now. The last person to have been here had left at some point between the murders and the discovery, without being seen, without leaving any trace of who they were. Just like those footprints in the snow 2 weeks earlier, they had come in. And they had left no tracks going out. The police investigation that followed was, by any measure, a disaster. Word spread quickly across Bavaria. Journalists arrived before forensic investigators. Curious locals walked through the crime scene before it could be properly secured. Evidence was contaminated. Footprints were trampled. The careful record of what had been touched and moved was gone before anyone thought to preserve it. But the most catastrophic decision came next. The 6 victims were examined by the authorities, and then, following a suggestion that was inexplicably approved, the severed heads of the victims were removed from their bodies and sent to a Munich psychiatrist, not a forensic examiner, not a pathologist, a clairvoyant analyst who claimed he could determine the identity of a killer by examining the eyes of the deceased. The heads were never returned. The forensic opportunity was destroyed forever. Over the following months, investigators interviewed more than 100 suspects. The prime person of interest was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor who had fathered Joseph, who had a complicated history with Victoria, and who had been notably quick to lead the other men directly to the barn on the day of discovery, rather than the house. He denied everything. He was questioned repeatedly over the years. He was never charged. Others were suspected: a drifter, a former soldier, a man seen near the farm in early 1922. None of them were ever conclusively linked to the crimes. Germany was a country in chaos in 1922. Inflation was spiraling. The aftermath of the First World War had shattered institutions. Records were incomplete. Witnesses were unreliable. The investigation slowly, quietly fell apart. And the case went cold. The Hinterkaifeck farm no longer exists. The buildings were demolished not long after the investigation concluded. The land was cleared. Today, there is a small memorial cross at the site, a single marker for 6 people who died there and for a killer who was never found. The case has never officially been closed. Over the decades, researchers and criminologists have revisited it dozens of times. In 2007, students from a German police academy conducted a complete re-examination of the original case files using modern forensic methodology. Their conclusion, after months of analysis, was the same as every conclusion before it. Insufficient evidence to name a perpetrator. Lorenz Schlittenbauer died in 1941, having always denied any involvement. Most modern researchers consider him the most likely suspect. The motive was there. The proximity was there. His behavior on the day of discovery raised questions that were never adequately answered. But likely is not the same as proven. And proven is the only thing that closes a case. What we are left with is this: a family on an isolated farm received warning after warning. Tracks in the snow, noises in the attic, missing keys, a fleeing maid. And they stayed. They were killed one night in late March 1922 by someone who knew the farm well enough to lure them out one by one, and who felt safe enough to live in their home for 4 days afterward. That person woke up every morning in that house. They ate at that table. They fed those animals. They kept that fire burning. They looked out those windows at the snow, and at some point, they simply walked away. Out into the forest, back the way they came, no footprints left behind. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most documented unsolved cases in German criminal history. Over 100 years have passed. Everyone who was there is long dead, but the case is still open. And somewhere, at some point in 1922, a person who knew exactly what they had done went home and lived the rest of their life and was never caught. If you want to go deeper on any of the cases in this video, they are all linked in the description. The Hinterkaifeck case files, partially translated into English, are publicly available. Read them late at night, alone. You have been warned.